Colonel Parrish was in charge of the program there at Moed Field then. And I was coming in from a flight, cross-country flight. He called me over. He said, "Chief, the Japs just attacked Pearl Harbor." And he told me about all the destruction they had done over there. He said they always said the Japs couldn't fly because their eyes weren't slanted right. But he said they sure raised hell today. But that was a consensus of opinion then, that people of color just couldn't use airplanes.
The consensus was getting a wake-up call from both the South Seas and skies over Alabama. Davis, Charles DeVoe, Mac Ross, George Roberts, and Lemuel Custis made history on March 7, 1942, when they graduated to become the U.S. Army Air Force's first black pilots. But 33 pilots would be needed to provide a full complement for the 99th Pursuit Squadron. Newly completed facilities made life better for following classes. But the best improvement came when Kentucky-born Colonel Noel Parrish took over command from Kimball.
He saw the people at Tuskegee, and these were men and women, as people. The men were soldiers. All of this was a resource for the United States. Everybody there was there because they were patriotic.
If it hadn't been for him, I think the experiment would have failed. But he saw to it that, you know, everything was done fairly. Later on, we got put in charge over the Army Airfield, and everybody got a square deal.
Davis, in command of the 99th since August, was faced not only with a personnel shortage, but also with the challenge of keeping up the morale of graduated pilots who had to repeat training exercises again and again, and who could not escape the segregated isolation of the base.
Well, this would be isolated. You wouldn't dare go to town. That's the first thing. You know, the post is nice, but geez, you look at guys all day long, you don't want to see guys all. You like to go to town and have some fun.
It was very cordial, nice atmosphere. But they had nowhere to go but Montgomery. That was the big city. And so they would come down and try to find a girl. Soldiers were everywhere. It was your fault if you didn't get you one.
Our biggest concern was to accomplish what we were setting out to do. And that was to be good enough to get and earn our wings.
By the end of 42, the 99th Fighter Squadron was combat ready, its pilots having endured the struggle for the right to fight.
Those of us who were still in civilian flying and those who were entering the Army Air Corps, we all had the attitude that we want to fight for America, fly for America, and fight for America.
Despite being ready for combat, orders still did not come.
Since they did not send us immediately, we had an additional, say, 8 or 9 months, almost a year, of continued transitional training, which opted to our benefit, which the average, let's say, white cadet probably didn't get.
Fed up with the indecision, Noel Parrish did the unthinkable. He flew to Washington unannounced, walked into Undersecretary of War for Air Robert Levitt's office, and demanded a plan be made to send his men overseas. Finally, on April 1st, 1943, the 99th was called for departure. The evening before, a party was held for its officers. They danced with their wives and sweethearts to Jimmy Lunsford's For Dancers Only, and they slow-dragged to Buddy Johnson's Sweet Slumber. The next day at Chehaw Station, Colonel Parrish and a crowd of well-wishers saw them off.
We were prepared to accept the obligations that go with the responsibility of earning your wings, and we had earned our wings, and it was regarded by us as the next step in proving that this thing was not merely an experiment to go down the tubes, but it was something that was opening the doors for any other black kid that might aspire to flying and performing.
So these were the men who had found their way to the edge of battle, heading for their first taste of combat. Maybe they were fighting for a country that didn't want them, but they were also fighting for themselves, for the pride of their people, and for the possibility that the freedom denied them might come their way if they were willing to risk their lives for it. It was not only pilots who'd left America to serve on the North African front. Throughout the coming war effort, the Tuskegee Airmen would be kept flying by dedicated men and women who ensured that the pilots and aircraft were able to carry out their missions. The support provided from mechanics to medics was outstanding.
Our welcome, quote unquote, by the 33rd Fighter Group, to which we were assigned or operational orders, was less than a welcome.
They offered no opportunity for us to profit by their experience. They did not commingle the flights where we could fly formation with some of their experienced people. They simply said, you're here, and we received our target assignments every day like any of the other veteran squadrons.
On June 2nd, 1943, they started combat operations with a ground strafing attack on the island of Pantelleria. A month later, Lieutenant Charles Hall, escorting a B-25 bomber group, scored the squadron's first aerial victory when he shot down a German Focke-Wulf 190. It would be 6 months before another plane would fall to the guns of the 99th's Warhawks. Assigned to tactical support operations at low altitudes, they rarely encountered enemy aircraft.
A very dirty, thankless, and hazardous job. When you were over 500 feet, you were really too high to do and give the support that you were supposed to be given to the troops.
The 99th helped Patton's army make its advance through Sicily, but it was clear that Army brass continued to oppose the unit's involvement in the war. Colonel William Momeyer, the 33rd's commander, declared that based on the performance of the 99th Fighter Squadron to date, it is my opinion that they are not of the fighting caliber of any squadron in this group.
Our answer was very simple. At 500 to 1,000 feet, in anti-aircraft and small arm fire, destroying ground targets, and the German pilots not coming down into this atmosphere. They were up at 5, 6, 8, 9, 10,000 feet, where the P-38s and the Spitfires were. Certainly the armies, the Allied armies, appreciated the close support that they were getting from us.
The mainstream American press jumped on the rumor wagon. Time magazine's September 20, 1943 article, "Experiment Proved," insinuated that Top Air Command was ready to pull the 99th from combat duty and assign them to convoy support. Colonel Davis, transferred stateside to take command of the 332nd Fighter Group training at Selfridge Field in Michigan, found himself confronted with attempts to end the life of the 99th.
This was, I think, perhaps, as I look back upon it, the most disturbing time of my career in the military. We were doing a mission that I knew was not only completely satisfactory, but I knew that we were doing it very well.
Army Air Forces Commander General Henry Hap Arnold visited Captain George Spanky Roberts, who'd taken over the squadron from Davis. Roberts did not think the visit went well. Arnold, never an advocate of the Tuskegee program, did, to his credit, order studies to address the questions about their performance objectively.
That study, beyond any doubt whatsoever, showed that the 99th, from just about any standpoint you can imagine, was at least equal, if not superior, to some of the other P-40 squadrons in the theater.
The blessing was when we got over to the east coast of Italy and were assigned to the 79th Fighter Group under Colonel E.E. Bates. Immediately, the 99th was commingled in terms of flights. This brought on a feeling of acceptance, a feeling of camaraderie, a feeling that we were in a war effort, and together and jointly, we were making our contributions.
Well, I was among the 4th replacement group that went over to the 99th. I was flying wing for Lieutenant Bowling. I remember that he caught a German Focke-Wulf 190 began to fire at it. The pilot bailed out and the aircraft burned. And we saw it going down on fire. Now, that was my very first mission. I had, I don't know what I felt. Really, at that time, you don't feel anything. It's after you get back and land that you really feel that, well, look what happened.
With the new year, 1944, the squadron began covering the Allied invasion of Anzio. On January 27th, the squadron ran into a flock of German Focke-Wulf 190s.
And so they appeared on the scene, and we were fortunate, lucky enough to shoot some down. So immediately our squadron went from a squadron that had been ignored, more or less, to one that was being recognized, again, because we had shot down some airplanes. And that was the turning point in the history and the fortunes of the 99th.
Lemuel Custis was one of the 8 pilots who would do victory roles that day, along with Lieutenants Ashley, Bow, Dietz, Leon Roberts, Toppins, Bailey, and Eagleson.
I swung out to the right, and as I started to come back in, I saw a German Focke-Wulf 190. So I opened fire on him, and I ran my machine gun fire right straight up in through the cockpit. And I was close enough to actually see him bleeding through the face and mouth. And again, it was one of those things that you don't think about until you got back, and you got back and said, well, my God, I killed somebody. But then you realize very soon it's either you do it to them or they do it to you.
The 99 proved, once they had the opportunity of being relieved from close support work, to that they were good air-to-air combat pilots. And in some 3 days, flying protective cover over the invasion fleet, they shot down 17 German aircraft. The question was answered. They could fly, they could fight, and they were combat capable.
As the 99th continued to fly Anzio support into February, their victory totals continued to mount. The news of their aerial victories made its way home.
We were happy when we heard good news about them. We cheered them, and we were much happier than we had been. And we just saw things looking up.
Although many of the brass in the Air Corps had not expected them to succeed, even they were now convinced that the Tuskegee Airmen earned a place in the war. In January of 44, Colonel Davis returned to the front with the all-black 332nd Fighter Group. Consisting of 3 more fighter squadrons, the group was now flying the Republic P-47 Thunderbolts. On June 25th, Lieutenants Wendell Pruitt and Gwen Pearson spotted a German warship in Trieste Harbor. Using only the aircraft's machine guns, they ignited the ship's ammunition storage area, sending the destroyer to the sea bottom. One man who took particular note of the combat excellence of the Tuskegee Airmen was General Ira C. Eaker, commander of the 15th Air Force. Carrying out strategic operations with long-range bombings, the Allies attacked the enemy's means to wage war, destroying its weapons and supplies before they could be used in combat. But on some missions, 25 or more bombers with crews of 11 men each had been lost. A recurring problem was escort pilots leaving their bombers vulnerable while off hunting kills for personal glory. The loss of life had been great. Eaker now assigned Davis's men the mission of protecting the bomber crews so that there would be no misunderstanding of their duty. Davis called an assembly and informed the pilots that if he ever received a report that anyone had left a bomber to chase after an enemy plane, he would not only ground the pilot, but subject him to court-martial.
And then, to the great disappointment of the Luftwaffe, we got 51s also, and we went all the way.
The P-51 was the pride and joy of the Air Force. With its fuel drop tanks, it was the war's longest-range fighter.
It was the superior fighter built in our country, and it was a fighter that could get up to the altitude where we could use it against enemy fighters, and if the pilot were skillful enough, he would always come out the winner.
Proud of its new aircraft, the 332nd continued a tradition started on their P-47s, painting the vertical stabilizers of their P-51s red. This dash of style brought them their signature nickname, the Red Tails. Within weeks, the 99th was merged into the 332nd, which was essentially a step backwards into a segregated unit. Some of the sting was taken off, however, for the new assignment meant transitioning into better planes. The entire group was now flying Mustangs.
332nd Fighter Group, composed of the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons, in the first 40 days of its operation, in escort operations, shot down 40 enemy airplanes.
We always worried about anti-aircraft fire, what was called flak, exploding shells that regularly knocked bombers out of the air, but it was most reassuring to know that once you had turned away from that target and started the long trek home, there would be fighter planes out there to protect you from possible enemy action. I remember one day when we picked them up on a mission to southern Germany. At first, there was some mix-up about the rendezvous. There were a couple of minutes delayed, and I heard some racial epithets going out about these black pilots. But suddenly they appeared and moved in and did their job so well that everybody was filled with admiration. I think I recall one of those Tuskegee pilots saying something like this: "Why don't you white guys shut up? We're going to take you home." And then they did. You discover suddenly that in the face of life or death issues, the color of a person's skin doesn't amount to much.
Like the old saying goes, like there's no such thing as an atheist in the foxhole. And there's no such thing as segregation when you're fighting side by side.
All of the bombardment groups of the 15th Air Force welcomed the escort of the 332nd because they knew that the 332nd would go through the flak with them and meet them on the other side. They stayed with the bombers, and they never lost a single bomber that they were escorting the enemy fighters during the course of that year that we operated. The only group. I don't know of any other group.
No other group equaled the record of the Red Tails, but their victories did not come without loss. Whereas most pilots flew only 50 missions before returning to the United States, the Tuskegee pilots, due to lack of replacements, fought well towards 100 missions, increasing daily their chances of injury and death. Sadly, original cadet Mac Ross lost his life in a crash while transitioning into the P-51. A total of 66 men gave their lives in the effort.